The sun had barely risen when the maid stepped through the tall iron gates of the big house where she worked. She held her small bag in one hand and her son's hand in the other. Her son walked quietly beside her, still half asleep but trying his best to keep up. He never complained. He knew his mother woke up long before everyone else, and he didn't want to make her morning any harder. The house belonged to a wealthy family, the kind of family that had everything perfectly polished: glass walls, marble floors, and soft carpets that felt like clouds. Every morning, the maid would start her work by dusting the living room, wiping the glass table, and making sure nothing was out of place. Her son usually sat in a corner, drawing on paper or simply watching the world around him. That day, however, was different. She had no one to watch her son, so she had no choice but to bring him along. She knew the lady of the house wasn't a cruel person, but she also wasn't used to having children around. The maid worried she might get scolded for bringing him, but she had no option, and she hoped her son would stay quiet and not disturb anyone. Her son had always been a calm child. He didn't talk much, and he didn't run around the way most kids his age did. He liked to sit still, listen, and observe. That was why he blended into the background so well in the big house. Most days, people barely noticed he was there. He never complained about being bored or tired. He simply watched, especially when the house was quiet in the morning. As the maid placed her bag down, her son slowly looked around. His eyes stopped at the grand piano sitting near the far side of the living room. It was a beautiful instrument, shiny and perfectly polished. Sometimes, during evening parties, someone would play its soft music, filling the house as guests chatted and laughed. On quiet mornings, however, it just sat there silently, almost like it was waiting for someone to touch it. The little boy had always admired the piano. Whenever he came with his mother, he would look at it from across the room, imagining how the keys would feel beneath his fingers. But he never dared to go near it. He knew it wasn't his place, and his mother had told him many times not to touch anything in the house. The millionaire's wife came down the stairs just then. She was dressed in a long morning robe, holding a cup of tea, looking calmer than usual. She walked through the living room and noticed the small boy sitting quietly on the edge of the sofa. She paused for a moment but didn't say anything. She only nodded lightly to the maid and continued walking. She had seen the boy many times before and always thought he was unusually quiet. She wondered what was going on in his little mind, but she never asked. The maid always seemed grateful when she didn't question things. So the wife kept her thoughts to herself. After breakfast was served and the house grew busier, the wife went to her study to handle some emails. The maid continued dusting shelves, cleaning windows, and checking for fingerprints on the shiny surfaces. Her son sat nearby, watching her work and listening to the sounds in the house. But every few minutes, his gaze drifted back to the piano. He didn't know why, but it always called to him. Maybe it was the way it looked, elegant and grand, almost magical. Or maybe it was because of the sound it made when someone played it. He remembered once hearing a guest play a slow tune that made him feel something warm inside his chest, something he couldn't explain. The maid noticed him staring and gently shook her head. He looked down immediately. He knew he shouldn't go near it. Still, the piano stayed in the back of his mind. A couple of hours passed, and the house suddenly became quiet. The wife was on a call in her study. The gardeners were working outside. The maid had gone upstairs to change the bedsheets, leaving her son alone in the living room for a few minutes. The boy looked around. Everything was still. His eyes slowly drifted toward the piano again. He waited for a few seconds, listening carefully to make sure no one was walking nearby. Then he stood up, very slowly, almost like he was afraid of breaking the silence. He took a small step, then another, then another. His heart beat faster, but he couldn't stop himself from moving closer. Finally, he reached the piano bench. He brushed his fingers across the smooth surface. It felt cold and beautiful. He hesitated, thinking about his mother's warnings, but a stronger feeling told him just to sit down for a moment, so he sat. His feet didn't even touch the ground. He looked at the keys, all lined up in front of him like a row of bright teeth. He raised his hand carefully and pressed one key. A soft note filled the room. It was gentle, warm, and perfect. He pressed another key, then another. His hands moved slowly at first, like he wasn't sure what he was doing. But soon, he relaxed. His fingers began to glide, creating a small melody he had heard someone play once. He didn't know the name of the tune, but somehow he remembered every sound of it. He was completely lost in the music. For him, the world faded away. He didn't think about the big house, or the expensive carpets, or even the fear of getting in trouble. All he felt was the music flowing through his fingers. What he didn't know was that the millionaire's wife had stepped quietly into the hallway. She was on her way to check on something when she heard the notes drifting out from the living room. At first, she thought someone had turned on a recording, but when she got closer, she froze. It was the maid's son. The boy sat there, playing with a calmness and grace she had never seen in a child his age. His back was straight, his hands moved smoothly across the keys, and his expression was peaceful, almost glowing. The wife couldn't believe it. She stood at the doorway, unable to move. The sound filled the whole room, wrapping it in a feeling she couldn't even describe. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft, pure, and heartfelt. The kind of music that didn't need words. She felt something shift inside her. This boy, the one she had always assumed was shy, was full of talent she had never expected. She watched him for several minutes, forgetting about her call, forgetting about everything else. She wasn't the only one who heard the music. The maid, coming down the stairs, stopped halfway when she heard the piano. She rushed down, her heart racing. She thought he must be in trouble for touching it. She imagined losing her job. She imagined the wife getting angry. But when she entered the living room, she saw something she didn't expect. Her son was playing like someone who had been trained for years, and the wife wasn't angry. She wasn't even speaking. She was simply standing there, watching him, almost in shock. The maid covered her mouth, not sure what to do. A part of her wanted to pull him away, but another part of her felt proud, even emotional. She had always known her son was different. He listened to music in a way other children didn't, but she never imagined he could play like this. The wife slowly turned toward the maid and whispered, "Did you know he could do this?" The maid shook her head, still speechless. "He's incredible," the wife murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The little boy kept playing, unaware of the two women watching him. He didn't know he had changed everything in that moment. He didn't know that his quiet, hidden talent had finally been seen. All he knew was that the piano made him feel alive, and that morning, for the first time ever, he wasn't just a quiet boy in the background. He was someone impossible to ignore. The sound of the last note slowly faded in the air, but the boy sat still on the piano bench, his hands resting gently on the keys. He didn't turn around. He didn't even know he had an audience. To him, it felt like only a few minutes had passed, but the music had kept him so lost in his own world that he had no idea how long he had been playing. The millionaire's wife finally took a quiet step forward. She didn't want to startle him, but she also couldn't stay silent anymore. She had never heard anything like this from a child so young. She cleared her throat softly, and the boy turned his head slightly, confused and startled at the same time. He looked at her, like he had been caught doing something wrong. She smiled, a gentle, warm smile, as if trying to tell him he wasn't in trouble. But the boy wasn't convinced. His mother had always told him not to touch anything in the house, and he suddenly felt a wave of fear rush through him before he could speak. Before he could slide off the bench and run to his mother, the wife said softly, "That was beautiful." The boy blinked at her. He hadn't expected those words. The maid, who had been standing behind the wife all this time, came forward quickly and placed her hand on her son's shoulder. She whispered, "I'm sorry, madam." He didn't mean to, but the wife raised her hand kindly. "No, no. Please, don't apologize." She stepped closer to the piano, her eyes still fixed on the boy. "I need to ask, where did you learn to play like that?" The maid swallowed hard, not sure how to answer. Her son looked up at her nervously. He didn't learn," the maid finally said. "He just listens to music wherever he can. Sometimes people play at the park or near the train station. He watches them, and then he tries to copy the sounds at home." The wife's eyebrows lifted in surprise. She looked at the boy again, this time with even more disbelief. "No lessons?" she asked. "Not even once?" The maid shook her head. "We can't afford lessons, madame." For a moment, the room went silent. The boy lowered his eyes, feeling embarrassed. He didn't want anyone to think he had done something wrong. His mother looked uncomfortable, not sure what to expect next. Then the wife said something no one imagined she would say. "Can you play something else for me?" The boy froze. The maid's eyes widened. "Madame, really it's okay. He shouldn't." The wife shook her head. "Please. I want to hear him again." She didn't say it because she was being polite. She said it because she genuinely wanted to hear more. Something in the boy's playing had touched her deeply. Like a soft memory she didn't know she needed to feel again. The boy looked at his mother, unsure what to do. She gave him a tiny nod, not because she wanted him to play, but because she didn't want to disrespect the lady of the house. So, with trembling fingers, the boy turned back to the piano and pressed a key. The sound echoed gently, and then, slowly, he began to play another tune he remembered from somewhere, maybe from a street musician, maybe from a video he once passed by in a shop window. He didn't really know. All he knew was how the music made him feel. This time, the melody wasn't soft and calm. It had a little energy, a little bounce. It sounded like sunlight through leaves, like children running through a park, like the world waking up with joy. The wife's eyes softened as she listened, and she sat down on the sofa nearby, completely focused on him. The maid stood behind her son, unsure whether to feel proud or nervous. Her heart beat fast, not because she feared trouble now, but because she had never seen her child like this, so confident, so alive, when he finished the second piece. The wife let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She smiled again, a smile that was fuller than before. "You have a gift," she said gently. The boy's cheeks warmed. No one had ever said that to him before. The maid looked down, her eyes shining. She tried to hide her emotion, but it wasn't easy. Just then, the millionaire, the master of the house, entered the room. He had come to pick up a file he needed for a meeting. But the moment he stepped inside, he sensed the unusual silence, the strange atmosphere, and the look on his wife's face. "What's happening?" he asked, glancing around with curiosity. His wife pointed toward the piano. "Listen," she whispered. The boy looked startled again, not expecting another audience. But the wife nodded at him gently, encouraging him. He hesitated only for a moment before pressing down on the keys again. As soon as the melody began, the millionaire's expression changed. He wasn't a man who showed emotion easily, but even he couldn't hide the surprise that settled across his face. "That's him?" he asked softly, pointing at the boy. His wife nodded. "Yes, he's incredible, isn't he?" The millionaire walked closer, listening as the boy played. He wasn't just impressed, he was stunned. He had grown up seeing musicians perform at expensive events. He had heard some of the best pianists in the city, and yet this little boy, with no lessons, no teacher, no training, played with more heart than many professionals. When the boy finished, the millionaire looked at the maid. He learned this on his own. She nodded, embarrassed, not sure how he felt about it. The millionaire glanced at his wife. They exchanged a silent look, one that said they both understood something important had just happened. Then the wife leaned forward slightly and spoke to the boy. "Would you like to learn more? I mean real lessons, with a real teacher." The boy didn't understand at first. "Lessons?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said warmly. "Lessons with a good teacher. Someone who can help you grow. Someone who can teach you everything you want to learn." The boy looked at his mother immediately. She looked shocked. "No, madam," the maid began. "It's not necessary. We don't want to trouble you," but the wife cut her off gently. "It's no trouble. He deserves a chance. Some talents shouldn't be hidden." The boy stared down at his small hands, unsure whether to feel excited or afraid. He had dreamed of touching a piano for so long, and now someone was offering to teach him properly. It felt unreal. The millionaire spoke next. "We know a music academy nearby. It has excellent teachers. We can arrange everything. Don't worry about the cost." The maid blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. "Madam, sir, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," the wife replied. "Your son is already thanking us with his music." The boy finally looked up, his eyes filled with hope he had never allowed himself to feel before. He whispered shyly, "I want to learn." Those 4 simple words changed everything. A few days later, arrangements were made. The boy received his first piano lesson at the academy. The instructor, a kind older man, listened to him play and immediately looked impressed. He knew natural talent when he heard it, and this boy had something rare, instinct. Week after week, the boy learned new things: how to hold his hands, how to move his fingers smoothly, how to read basic notes, how to control his speed and rhythm. The teacher was amazed at how fast he learned. Every time the boy sat at a piano, it felt like he had been born to play. The millionaire's wife attended one of his practice sessions, sitting quietly at the back of the classroom. She watched the boy concentrate deeply, his small fingers moving with confidence. She couldn't help smiling. Something about him made her feel proud, as if she had discovered a hidden gem. Months passed. The boy grew more skilled, more confident, and more expressive. He began playing in small events at the academy. People who didn't know him would gather around and whisper, "Who is he? He's so young but so talented." One evening, during a small gathering at the big house, the wife invited the boy to play a short piece for the guests. The maid stood in the corner, nervous but proud beyond words. The boy sat at the same grand piano as before, the one where everything had begun. He took a deep breath and started playing a soft, emotional tune. The room grew completely silent. Guests listened with awe, whispering to each other about the boy's talent. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. The wife wiped a tear from her eye. The millionaire clapped with a proud smile. The maid pressed her hands to her chest, holding back tears of her own. Everyone saw him differently now, not just the maid's son, not just a quiet child who sat in the corner, but a young musician with a bright future, a future that started with one moment, one quiet morning, one empty living room, and one brave decision to touch the piano.